This scene unfolds the moment the plane takes off. Can you guess how she reacted? Sarah Mitchell stepped off the jet bridge at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport with a mixture of excitement and fatigue. It was early morning on a crisp autumn day, and Flight AA325 to Los Angeles was preparing to board. Sarah had worked relentlessly for the past 6 months, long hours at her architectural firm, weekend community service projects, and late-night study sessions for her lead certification. As a reward, she had earned a complimentary upgrade to first class through her frequent flyer program. She clutched her boarding pass tightly, picturing the wide leather seats, gourmet meal, and peaceful environment that awaited her 2,500 miles away on the West Coast. Walking down the aisle of the gleaming Airbus AA321, Sarah admired the cabin's modern design, soft ambient lighting overhead, polished wood veneer accents on the side panels, and individual touchscreen entertainment systems embedded in each headrest. Only 10 passengers occupied the spacious first-class section, an intimate enclave that felt more like a private lounge than a crowded airplane cabin. Sarah's heart fluttered with relief. This was exactly the environment she needed to decompress and catch up on work while soaring above the clouds. She spotted seat 2A, slipped into the plush leather cushion, and placed her carry-on in the overhead bin. No sooner had she settled in than Jessica Harper, the lead flight attendant, appeared at the front as one of the cabin. Jessica was in her early 30s with neatly pulled-back blonde hair, perfectly applied makeup, and a crisp uniform that bore the airline's insignia. Her posture was rigid, her expression unreadable. Jessica scanned the cabin with a practiced eye and then locked onto Sarah. Sarah felt that temperature drop in the cabin as Jessica's gaze pinned her like a spotlight. Jessica's lips pressed into a thin line, and she began walking towards Sarah's row with deliberate, measured steps. "Excuse me, ma'am," Jessica said, her voice cold and clipped. "Are you certain you belong in this cabin?" She extended a manicured hand towards Sarah's seat, as if the very act of sitting there constituted a crime. A hush fell over the first-class cabin. The other passengers turned their heads, curious and unsettled. Sarah swallowed, surprised by the accusatory tone. "Yes," she replied evenly, fishing her boarding pass from her purse. "Seat 2A, I was upgraded through my M1 Advantage account. May I show you my pass?" Jessica took the boarding pass without a word, scrutinized it under the cabin lights, then looked back at Sarah with a raised eyebrow. "Our records show you're not a regular first-class traveler," she said, emphasizing the word regular. "We have certain criteria for those who sit here." Sarah's heart pounded. She had flown first class before, earned enough miles, and had the digital upgrade confirmation on her phone. She opened her wallet to produce her frequent flyer card and the email notification. "I'm happy to show you any documentation you need," she said, striving to keep her voice calm. Jessica sighed dramatically and called softly to a uniformed security officer standing discreetly near the cabin door. "Please accompany this passenger to verify her identity," she instructed. The officer nodded and began to approach Sarah's row. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some sympathetic, others impatient. The cabin's warm lighting suddenly felt harsh, exposing every inch of tension in the air. Sarah realized that what should have been a pleasant, comfortable flight was devolving into a humiliating ordeal. She braced herself for whatever would come next, determined not to give Jessica the satisfaction of seeing her break under pressure. The security officer reached Sarah's row and offered a polite nod. "Ma'am, if you could stand and follow me to the front, we'll clear this up quickly." His tone was neutral, but Sarah could see the slight tightening around his eyes, the kind of tension one reserves for an unwanted task. Sarah stood, feeling the curious stares of her fellow first-class passengers burning into her back. She followed the officer down the aisle, past the first 3 rows of empty seats, to where Jessica and another flight attendant waited. Jessica tapped the screen on her handheld device and frowned. "Our manifest doesn't list you as upgraded," she said, her voice loud enough for several passengers to hear. Sarah took a deep breath and held up her phone, showing the confirmation email. "Advantage upgrade applied on October 12th at 7:03 p.m. Boarding pass is valid for seat 2A. The officer examined the phone, then scanned Sarah's government-issued ID. Everything checks out, he said quietly, handing her documents back. You're cleared to stay. A ripple of relief passed through Sarah's body, but she was not yet ready to return to her seat. She turned to Jessica, who looked momentarily taken aback. I apologize, ma'am, Jessica said stiffly, her cheeks slightly flushed. There must have been an error in our system. Sarah nodded curtly. Thank you for verifying, but I'd appreciate an apology for the way I was treated. Jessica's eyes narrowed as though she had never been challenged before. I'm sorry if you felt uncomfortable, she said, choosing her words carefully. Our priority is security and ensuring seats are occupied correctly. A middle-aged businessman in 1C leaned forward and cleared his throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, but I've flown this route dozens of times, and I've never seen a passenger treated like this. I think an apology is owed. Others murmured their agreement. Jessica's facade cracked. She looked around at the dozen witnesses. She glanced at the flight deck door as if seeking rescue, but the cockpit remained silent. Finally, she exhaled and nodded. You're right. I was out of line. Jessica turned to Sarah and offered a small, forced smile. I understand how upsetting that must have been. It won't happen again. Sarah accepted the apology, though it tasted hollow. She returned to her seat, the officer stepping aside respectfully. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet. Sarah buckled her seatbelt, staring straight ahead. She opened her laptop to review her project files, but her mind raced with indignation and disappointment. How quickly assumptions had been made about her worthiness to occupy a first-class seat simply because of her appearance. As the flight attendants prepared for takeoff, Jessica walked past Sarah's row, pausing for a moment. She cleared her throat and offered Sarah a glass of champagne on the house. For the inconvenience, she said softly. Sarah accepted the glass, the bubbles tickling her throat. She lifted the flute in a small toast. To respect, she said quietly, her voice steady. Jessica nodded, her expression unreadable. As the cabin door closed and the engines roared to life, Sarah felt the plane begin to taxi down the runway. She took a sip, bracing for the climb to cruising altitude, determined that this ordeal would not define her journey. 2 hours into the flight, after the seatbelt sign had been switched off, Sarah settled into the rhythm of her work. The overhead screens displayed the flight path, a straight line across the country, over rolling plains and mountain ranges, finally descending into the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles. Sarah reviewed her architectural renderings, annotating notes and responding to emails. Around her, other first-class passengers napped, watched movies, or sipped cocktails. The cabin hummed with the quiet comfort she had hoped for. If only it hadn't started with such a confrontation. Jessica appeared at Sarah's side with a tray of snacks, artisan cheese, fresh fruit, and warm bread. I've arranged for complimentary Wi-Fi access as well, she said, offering a small smile. I want to make sure the rest of your flight is pleasant. Sarah nodded. Thank you, she replied, surprised by the genuine tone in Jessica's voice this time. Jessica lingered. I'd like you to know that I've spoken with my supervisor, she said. We're reviewing our protocols to prevent a mistake like that from happening again. I'm truly sorry for my behavior. Sarah recognized the sincerity in her eyes. I appreciate that, she said softly. Later, Sarah made her way to the laboratory. In the narrow hallway, she passed the businessman from 1C, who gave her a discreet thumbs up. She smiled in return, feeling a wave of gratitude. Back at her seat, she noticed that several passengers had sent complimentary drink orders to her via the call button, a silent gesture of solidarity. Sarah realized that despite the initial humiliation, her courage to stand up for herself had shifted the mood in the cabin. As the captain announced the beginning of the descent into Los Angeles International Airport, Sarah closed her laptop. She reflected on the morning's events, the sharp sting of discrimination, the uncomfortable spotlight of the cabin's gaze, and the eventual vindication. She drafted a brief note of thanks to the captain and cabin crew, praising their professionalism once the error was discovered. She also submitted a formal feedback report through the airline's app, outlining her experience and suggesting diversity training for staff. She believed that constructive criticism could spark meaningful change. Touching down smoothly on the tarmac, Flight AA325 taxied to its gate. Passengers began to gather their belongings, eager to disembark. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, taking one last look at the cabin. Jessica caught her eye and gave a small nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of what they had been through together. Sarah returned the nod and stepped into the jet bridge. In the terminal, Sarah paused at the baggage carousel and checked her phone. She had a text from her best friend in Los Angeles. "Can't wait to see you. Dinner at our place?" Sarah typed back, "On my way. See you soon." She slipped her phone into her purse and smiled. The morning's ordeal had been painful, but it had also reminded her of her own dignity and the power of speaking up. As she walked toward the exit, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. No matter where life's flights might take her, she would always carry with her the conviction that respect and equality are rights, not privileges.